Hello everyone. Good evening. So I hope everyone had a wonderful day. So let me just share my screen. So yeah, welcome to day 8 of full stack development. So yesterday we went through what was Node.js, right? So what was Node.js? So before today we are going to build a small project, REST APIs project using Express.js. So before that, I'll just give a quick recap of what we went through yesterday. So what and all we went through yesterday? So yesterday we went through what was Node.js. So what is Node.js? Node.js is nothing but your runtime environment for your JavaScript. Okay. The reason why do we need Node.js? So that we can run our JavaScript outside the browser also. Due to this, we can create servers also using Node.js. Okay. And then we went through what is asynchronous, right? Before what is going through asynchronous, we went through what is synchronous. You can see in the diagram here. So what happens in synchronous, the code gets executed line by line. That means it will block the execution. In asynchronous, what happens? The code doesn't block the execution. If it is asynchronous, it will handle synchronous and asynchronous parallelly. So what is asynchronous code? Asynchronous code is nothing but a code which takes longer time to execute. So for that, what you need to do, you need to set a callbacks or promises or async await. From these three, you can achieve asynchronous programming in your JavaScript. Okay. So then what we went through what is event loop, right? So what is event loop? You can see in the diagram here. So what happens whenever there is an asynchronous function, whenever there is a function, it gets added to the call stack and then it will get executed and popped off. But if it is an asynchronous function, what happens? Let us wait until set timeout comes because it is an asynchronous. Yeah, wait. Yeah, this is set timeout. It goes to web APIs. It will come to callback queue again. Event loop will add it inside call stack. So this is how your asynchronous gets executed parallelly along with your synchronous due to the help of event loop. Okay. Then we set up a Node.js project, right? How? First, you need to install Node.js. You need to go to your browser, Node.js. Then you need to install this LTS version, right? Then after this, what we went through what was file system. So in a file system, there are two types, right? One is asynchronous and synchronous way. So from this, we read a file. And then we can also write a file using these two commands, using synchronous and asynchronous way. And then also we can delete the file using this command, unlink. And then we also went through how to create a directory, right? How to create a directory using mkdir. How to remove a directory using rmdir. Okay, so for example, what happens? Whenever it is synchronous, you don't have to pass a callback function here. If it is asynchronous, you need to pass a callback function. So what is the callback function? Callback function is nothing but a function which you pass as a parameter to another function. Okay. Then what we went through? We went through what are path modules. Say for example, if you want to work with any paths, right? By default, you'll be able to access two attributes. So what are those? File name and directory name. Through this, you'll get what is current path name and current directory name. So upon this, you can apply different methods so that you can get whatever data you want from your paths. Okay. Then we went through what are events, right? So we created our own custom event through event emitter. Since event emitter is a class, you need to create an instance of it. Through the instance, first you will emit, and then you can pass the parameters. So once this event is emitted, how do you listen to this event? You listen through this event through dot on. Okay, and then you pass a callback function. Okay, then we went through what is a HTTP module. And then yesterday we created a small server, right? So how do you do that? First, you need to import it. How do you do that? Require. And then you need to create a server. So once you create a server, and then you need to listen at a port number. Okay. So now what happens is, the thing is, you can create the server using HTTP module itself. So this is built in. But the problem is, so for example, if you're building a very huge application, right? So what happens is you can't build a huge like application and all using a simple HTTP module. So for that, what we have is we have something called as Express.js. So what is Express.js? So Express.js is nothing but a minimal framework for a Node.js to build a backend servers. Understood this? Using this Express.js, we can create our own servers. You can also use your own like inbuilt HTTP like module. But the thing is, it's not so much flexible for bigger applications. So for bigger applications, you'll use a package called as Express.js. So which is actually a framework, which is used to build your backend. The reason why we need to use Express.js because it is light and fast. Okay, that means it is not heavy loaded like Spring Boot and all. It is light and fast so that you can build the server with very less configurations. Okay, then it has something called as middleware support. So we will go through what is a middleware. So it has a middleware support, and then it also has a routing system. So what is routing system? Yesterday we went through, right? If you put /about, so this is like that is how you access different paths. And then you can also integrate databases with your Express.js framework. For example, like MongoDB, MySQL, and PostgreSQL and all, you can connect with your Express.js. Okay. Then now let us set up our Express.js project. So now we'll start creating a project. So this is a REST APIs project. Like future and all, we went through free public APIs, right? This free public APIs. So we went through here, we searched for any API. And then what we did, for example, I'll just select one API. For example, like this is okay. Yes. So here what I'll do, I'll copy and then I'll paste it. So what will I get here? I'll get the JSON format, right? Similar way, let's see how do we create this from our own data. Okay. So for that, what you need to do first, you need to go to your desktop and then create a yesterday also we created, right? So what I'll do, rather than creating a new file, I'll go to the same file. So go to your VS Code, then go to your file, open folder, and then you need to select Node.js. Node.js project. Okay. Once this is done, let us wait for it to load for some time. So by the time, let us go through what are HTTP status codes. So you know what is HTTP, right? So HTTP is nothing but your hypertext transfer protocol. So this is nothing but a set of protocols which you require for communication. Okay, between which client and server. So what is our client? Our client is the browser, and what is our server? Server is the backend. Okay, so now, yeah, my project has been opened. So now what I'll do, I'll close everything. So now here I'll create a new project. Not here, I'll come outside, create a new project. So REST API project. We'll go through what is REST API also. So as of now, just create REST API project. So now once this is done, you need to create a node project, right? So how do you do that? What is the command? I'll say the command again. npm init -y. So once you type this command, what happens here? You can see I'll get a package.json. So once I get package.json, that means I can install all my node modules. So how do you install your node modules? Through npm, right? So what is npm? Node package manager. Okay, so now once this is done, I will install two packages here. Okay, the first package is nodemon. So we went through what is nodemon, right, yesterday. What it does, it basically restarts your server automatically. So you don't have to manually restart it after every change. So what I'll do here, first I'll type npm I nodemon. So let it get installed. Yeah, you can see my Nodemon has been installed here. So how do I check if something is installed? You need to check in your dependencies. So in your dependencies, you'll be having something called as Nodemon. So now once this is done, you need to install another package called as Express. So what is the command? npm i express. Okay. So now let's wait until our Express gets installed. You can see here there is only Node1, right? So as soon as this npm finishes, you can see a Express will be added. You can see Express has been added. Okay. So now we know that whenever we create our node project, there is something called as index.js file. So what you have to do, you have to manually create this. So now what I'll do, I'll create this. So I'll go to my REST API project to right click. So here I'll create a new file, index.js. Okay. You understood this part? You need to install two packages. So what are those packages? First is nodemon, first is express, and then second is nodemon. Okay. Once that is done, you need to create your index.js file. Okay. So now once that is done, what you have to do is you need to run this file, right? So how do I run? If you use Node, the problem is you have to manually restart it after every change. But we install something called as nodemon, right? So what I'll do, instead of npm, I'll just type nodemon. So nodemon index.js file name. So once this is done, you can see my nodemon is successfully running my app. So how do I check? I'll just console log here to check whether it's running or not. I will log this. Let me clear log. So now you can see here, nodemon will print app is running. That means my index.js is running. So now what I will do, I'll start creating my Express.js application. So before we start creating Express.js application, what we'll do is we'll just see what is REST APIs. Now just increase this image. You can see, so what are REST APIs? Okay, we have this called as client. So what is client? Client is our browser. And then you have server. So which is our server? Our computer. So as of now, we are building a server here. Okay. Your Express.js application is nothing but we are creating a server here. So what happens is whenever I want to get some data, right? So for this project, we'll create a user, for example, like say, for example, if you're from school or something like office, we'll create user management system through the APIs. Okay, so what happens is, you know that HTTP has four like different methods, but the most commonly used methods are get, post, delete, and put. So what does get do? Get will fetch your data. Okay, so what does post do? Post will create a data. That means it will add a data to your database. And what does delete do? Delete means in the name itself, it will say it will delete whatever request you are sending. And then put. So put means it will update. So okay, these are like in other way called as your CRUD operations. So usually you'll come across this word in development time and also what are CRUD operations? So it's nothing but a short form for create, read, update, delete. So if you want to create something, what you need to do, you need to pass a post request. So through which HTTP. So for example, first is C, right? Create. So for create, you need to do a HTTP post request. And then for R, so what is R? Read. So for read, you need to pass a HTTP GET request. And then what is CRU? So what is U? Update. So for update, you need to pass HTTP put request. And then at last delete. So in the name itself, it is delete. Okay, this is how you achieve CRUD operations through HTTP. So what is HTTP? It's nothing but a protocol. Through this, you will send all the requests to the server. So each request can have this type of different types. So one is get, post, delete, and put. Nothing but your update. And then there is something called as REST APIs. So what are REST APIs? So REST APIs are nothing but a structure on how you create your API. So there are different architecture on how you create your APIs. So, but the most commonly used one is REST APIs. Okay. So now what happens here is, let me just take a rough picture of how it looks like. This is only better idea. So what happens in REST APIs is you will create a common endpoint. For example, say if I want to fetch some users data, right? So what I'll do, I'll go to this URL here. What I'll do, I'll just type /users. That means what I need to do is I need to fetch all the users data. Okay. If I want to create something like cars, right? What I'll do, cars/cars. That means I need to fetch cars data. So how does this work? For example, I'll just go to Node project, Node.js file itself. You can see here, when I click on this, right? If I click on learn, you can see there is some data attached to the URL. So what happens is, so there are different URLs. So with each URL, you can return two type of things. One is in React, we saw, right? In React, what we returned? We returned JSX, which is nothing but your HTML files. In Angular also, we returned your HTML, your components. But there is a second option. So what is the second option? The second option is called as API. So what is API? So API we went to like in a day one itself, right? API is nothing but your application programming interface. You can see here below this JSON, there is something, right? So this structure is nothing but your API. So your API, the data will be in the form of JSON. Okay, what is JSON? JavaScript Object Notation. So this is a common format how the client and server communicate with each other. Okay, say for example, if I want to send some data from the client, I will send it in the form of JSON through my API. Okay, say for example, if the server wants to send some response to the client, what it does, it will also send the data in the form of JSON through API. So now you know you understood what is API, right? So to create API, there are different ways. The most common way is REST architecture. So what is REST architecture? In REST architecture, what you'll do is you'll create a common endpoint. For example, like surveys/surveys/surveys. So whatever request you do, it will be having a common endpoint. So all the requests will go through a common endpoint, but each request with a common endpoint will return a different data. Okay, for example, say I want to create a API for surveys. So what I will do, I'll create an endpoint. So what is endpoint is nothing but your URL name. So here I'll create surveys. So now if I send a HTTP GET request to the same endpoint surveys, I'll get the data. Okay, if I send a POST request to the same endpoint to the surveys, it will add the data. If I send delete to the same endpoint, it will delete. If I do update throughput, it will update it. So here the key things to remember is for same endpoints, you will send different HTTP requests. So based on your request, that CRUD operation gets executed. Okay, this you understood, right? So now what happens is, so let us just start creating our Express.js. So we went through like yesterday, we created a server using what? We created a server using HTTP module, right? So here we'll create a server using Express.js. So the first step is first you need to import it. So how do you do that? Const express is equals to require. And then here you need to pass express. So once this is done, this is a function. Okay, you need to call this function. This function returns an app. Through the app, you will be able to access different methods and all, from which you'll create your application. First step is you need to import this express. So once this is done, the second step is you need to extract the app from express. So how do you do that? Create a variable called as app. Const app is equals to express. Sorry, express. Okay, once this is done, all my data or like all the different inbuilt methods which is there in the express, we can access through your app. So once this is done, I need to listen to my server. So why do you need to listen? Because there's an application, right? So whenever two applications wants to communicate with each other, they need to run the application inside a port. Okay, you understood what is port, right? So now what I'll do, here I'll create another variable called as port. Okay, port is equals to, you can give anything. I'll just create 3000. It's up to you. You can give 4000, anything you want. So here I'll just give port is 3000. So now what I'll do, once I create an app, I need to listen to it. That means I need to run this app. So how do you run that? So if you do app dot, you'll be able to access different set of methods here. Okay, we won't be going through all this because it's a very lot. We'll just go through the methods from which we can create our project. So first is here, you can see in the fourth line, there is a method called as listen. Once you click on this, you can see first parameter of this listen is port number. So what is my port number? 3000. So instead of passing 3000, I'll pass this variable. Okay. Okay. Second is it will take a callback function. Okay. In this callback function, I'll simply log server running on port 3000. Okay. So now you can see my Node.js, sorry, my Node1. I'll just quit and I'll rerun it again. You can see that my server is running at port 3000. Okay, now I'll try to access this port 3000. So how do you do that? You need to go to your browser here, localhost 3000. I can see there is nothing, but it is just saying cannot get, means it's not able to get any data. So now what we'll do, we'll just return some dummy data. So how do you do that? So first you need to import it, create a port, you need to extract app. So once you do that, you need to listen to the port number 3000, and then you need to access that in your browser. So here, so now what we'll do from our server, we will send a like small message to the client. So which is our client? This is our client, right? Our browser. So what I'll do is below app, here you need to define your routes. Okay. So what are routes? I'll go through the PPT here. Here you you got to know how to set up, right, your Express.js. So before going through the status codes, I'll just go through what are routes. So here you can see in this PPT, routes define how the server responds to different HTTP requests. So we went through, we can send different HTTP requests, right? So what happens is, to every HTTP request, you need to handle it in your Express app. So how do you handle that? Here you can see in the diagram, get slash, and then you need to pass a callback function. Okay. Here, every callback function has two parameters available. One is request. So what is request? Request is nothing but the data you are sending from the front end, okay, which is your client. And then you can also access response. So what is response? Response is nothing but the data which you are sending from the backend. Okay, sending from the server to the client. So what the basic syntax on how to create routing is, first you need to define which HTTP method you'll use. You can see .get, .post, .put, .delete. Then you need to define the path. So this is the routing path. And then after, you need to define the callback function. So every callback function has two parameters accessible. So one is request and response. So we'll go through this in the code. So as of now, just know the syntax on how to create routes. So now what we'll do, we'll just create a simple route here. So how do you do that? First, you need to use app, and then you need to do dot. So here you can see there'll be your HTTP methods here. So where is get? You can see there is get. Now click on this, right? When I hover, you can see, just a minute. You can see in the property it says, that means if you're getting this, you're successfully able to access your get method. So what is get? Get is your HTTP method. And then the second parameter is, first you need to call it because get is a function. So what is the syntax here? First, you need to define the path. So slash means it is default path. That means it's a home path. So whatever we are having here, right? If there is nothing means it is a slash. Okay, so say for example, if I run this, you'll get the same thing. If I put slash and run, right, you can see what happens. I'll get the same thing. That means slash is nothing but your default path. So what I'll do, I'll just create a slash here, and then you need to pass a callback function. Okay, this callback function has access to two parameters. So what are those? Request and response. Okay, so now since this is a server, what should I send? Say for example, if I'm clicking in the client, right? So this is sending a request. So now here, what am I coding? I'm coding a server. So what do I send from the server? Request or response? Response, right? Because server always sends a response. So how do you do that? Response dot send. Here you can send anything. Hello, this message is from server. So now you can see what happens. If I rerun this, just a minute, I'll stop and rerun this file again. So now if I refresh this, you can see I'm getting this message. Hello, this message is from server. So where am I getting from this message? I'm getting this message from the server, from the backend. So how do you check whether it is the same thing? You need to click on inspect. Here, you need to go to the networks. Inside networks, if I refresh, you can see this is the data which I'm getting from the backend. You can see in the response section, this is the data I'm getting from the backend. Okay, for which path is this? This is to the path, just slash. Say, for example, I want to create another path called as, for example, like greet. Okay, so if now I need to create, you can see if I put slash greet, it will say cannot get greet. That means there is nothing to be returned. So what I'll do, I'll create a message at this path and I'll send a message. So how do you do that? You need to come to your app again. So which method is this? Again, you need to create a get method. So inside get, you need to first pass the URL. So what is the URL here? Slash greet, right? Then a callback function. This will have request and response. Then you need to send it. Response dot send, because what the backend sends, it sends the server, right? So what I'll send? Hello, great. How you doing? Okay, now if I go to this URL, I'll get this message. Okay, if I go to this URL, I'll get this message. Okay, let's check that. So I will stop this and I'll rerun my application again. So now if I refresh it, you can see sorry, the spelling is wrong here. EET. So now you can see I'm getting this message when I go to this URL, which is great. So which request it is? It is a get request, right? So say for example, if I remove this, I'll just keep slash, I'll get this message. So so now you got to know how paths and how do you define routes, right? So for every route, you will use a HTTP method. So this is get. So as we build the project, we'll go through what is different HTTP methods. So for every HTTP method, you need to define a route. That means your URL. And then here, you'll be able to access request and response. Okay. Then you can send your data. So here you can send two types of data. So one is your string, and also there is something called as response.json. So what is JSON? We went through what is JSON, right? You can see here. JSON is nothing but your object. Or else, if you're from the Python background, you can compare this to your dictionary. Okay. So this is nothing but your JSON. Say, for example, if I want to send some JSON method. So how do I do that? You need to just lower brackets, ID1, and then message follow from JSON. Okay, so now I'll stop this and I'll rerun this. So now let's see what we'll get. You can see slash, I'm getting my JSON. Okay, you can see, right? This is similar to your public API. So where is that? This one. Okay, this is similar to this thing. Okay, so instead of data, I'm sending JSON. Okay, so now you got to know how do you send data using send method. How do you send JSON using JSON method? So whatever object you pass here, it will be converted to JSON. Okay, so this is the common format you need to use whenever you're creating an APIs. Okay, so once this is done, let us see what are dynamic routes. So say for example, what happens is here after greet, I need to pass a parameter to this greet. So if it is a function, how do you pass a parameter inside here, right? But this is a URL. Okay, here, say for example, if I want to pass some data to this greet. So how do I do that? The syntax is first you need to put slash colon and then your ID. Okay, this is how you pass a variable. That means in other terms, this is called as path parameter. So through path parameter, what happens is, say for example, if you just use get, what happens? It will send all the data. Say for example, if I want only one person's data, okay, for example, like Arun's data. So what happens? I need to pass a path parameter saying Arun. Okay, for instead of ID, I'll just create a name. Okay, so what happens is, so here, whatever I'll pass after greet, I need to access that inside my express.js function so that through that I can send the data, delete the data. It's up to me. What I need to do, I just need to get whatever data has been passed here. So how do you do that? First, you need to use colon and then a path parameter. So how do you access this path parameter? Through your request, because whatever the client sends, it is a request, right? Even though it is an URL, it comes under request. So how do you access that? Const name is equals to request dot. You can see there is a something called as params. Okay, click on that and then params is an object. So inside that, which property you need to access? Name. Okay, so don't get confused by this params. So params is nothing but your whatever path parameters you pass here, they go into the params. So inside this, you need to access what you need. For example, here if I have ID, I need to access ID. So since I have name here, I'll access name. Then what I'll do, I'll just console log this name, comma name. So now what happens is, if I click here, where is it? If I click here, I'll get nothing. Once I add name here, you can see here, just a minute. Instead of JSON, I'll just send this. Okay, what I'm doing is basically I'm taking a path parameter and then I'm accessing it through params and then I'm sending it in my string here. So now I'll rerun this. So now if I refresh, just a minute. Yeah, the thing is, you can see that this is must and should. So what I'll do is I'll create two functions here. Okay, so one is greet. What it does, it will just simply return your message. Okay, and then with path parameter. So if you just do greet, you will get this simple message. If you pass a path parameter, it will get the message with path parameter. So now I'll rerun this again. If I do greet, I'll just get the message. So if I pass something here, invalid status code. Just a minute, there's some problem here. Let us check what is the problem. Okay. The thing is, send will take only a single hour. So what I'll do, I'll just use something called a string interpolation. You understood this concept? You would have familiar with JavaScript, right? So what is string interpolation? So inside, I need to write an embedded JavaScript. So what is the syntax? Backticks and then dollar and then the lower brackets. Okay, so now I'll rerun this again. And if I refresh, you can see I'm getting Shiva. So if I remove this and I'll add some other name, SH, you can see I'll get Akash. That means whatever data I'm passing here, I'm able to access inside my Express.js function. Okay. So now what we'll do, say for example, if I pass another function here, okay, we will see that. So now let's start creating our Express.js project. So for that, what I'll do, I'll just remove everything. So now I'll just keep only these three things. Okay, so now what we'll do is, since I don't have the backend, so what I'll do, I'll create a variable here itself. Okay, let users is equals to. So here I'll create a user one. Okay, so what is first user? Anything you want. John. First, I'll create an ID for the user. Okay. Since I don't have the backend, I'm just mimicking my backend. So sorry, since I don't have the connection to database, since we are learning only Express.js, what I'm doing is I'm creating a variable here. So as of now, we will think this variable only is our database. Okay, whatever operations we'll be doing on this variable. If you know how to connect to the backend, you can connect and use it. Since this is just an Express.js class, we'll just use a variable. Okay. So now here I'll create some two dummy users. Okay. And then you have username property. Sorry, I'll keep this as ID as one. This is a number. Okay. Here I'll keep it as a string. John. And then email. Okay. Then what I'll do, I'll just create job. So what is this job? Like IT. Okay. Second, I'll create another user. So here what I'll do, I'll create another ID, ID2, and then user name. Okay. Here what I'll do is I'll create, for example, like another user. Okay. And then email. And then job, sales. Okay, it's up to you can use. So what I did is I just created two dummy users. So through these users, let's start creating our application. So now what we do is, so since we don't have connection to database, so what I'll just think of this is as your database. Okay. So now first is we need to, I'll just create how our structure will look like here. So inside the REST API, you don't have to create this. You just REST txt. So what we'll do is, so how does the REST APIs works? You need to create a common endpoint, right? So what my endpoint is /API/users. So this is my common endpoint for my REST APIs. Okay. So now what I will do, if I do get method, and then if I do /API/users, so I need to return all user data. Okay. So now this is for my get HTTP. So now you don't have to write this. I'm just typing this so that you guys understand how the REST APIs are created. So the endpoint for my REST APIs is API/users. Okay. For this endpoint, if you use a get method, you will get all the data. If I use get by ID, for this, if I do /API/user/ID, I'll return user by ID. Okay. Understand this? If I pass a parameter, path parameter, I'll only fetch that single user. If there is nothing, I'll fetch all the user. So similar case with all your different. So now for put, what is that? /API/users update user. So here what happens is there is a problem here. You can't update all the users. So for that you need to pass an ID also when you're using put method. Update user by ID. Similar way with delete. Here also you should pass ID. So what is the common endpoint? Slash users it delete user by ID. And then at last post. Post you don't have to pass any ID. So what is the endpoint for this? API slash users. So now here you can see there are so many different HTTP methods, but my endpoint remains the same. This structure is must and should when you're creating you can see everything is same, but I'm just passing path parameters whenever I want. Okay. So now we'll start creating this in our, sorry, just a minute. So we'll start creating this in, this is just the information which I'm showing you how the REST APIs are created. We'll start implementing this in our project. So now come here. First, which is my route? Get all users. So how do I do that? App dot use, sorry, app dot get. Okay. So inside get, what you need to pass? Path parameter. So here, what is my common endpoint for my application? API slash users. So I'll add the same thing here. Slash API slash users. So then it takes a callback function, it will add request and response. Okay. Then what you need to do, you need to send a JSON format, right? So how do you do that? Response.json. So here what you need to send? You need to send users. Where is my users? Here, right? This variable. What I'll do, so whatever user I have defined here, this will be sent as JSON as a response. Okay. So now let us check whether this is working. I'll open my terminal again. Now I'll stop and rerun this. Now you should go to this path. Okay, what I'll do, I'll go here, I'll remove this, I'll go to this path. So now you can see I'm getting two datas in the form of JSON. That means you have successfully created a REST APIs using get method. Okay, so one part is done. Okay, so now say for example, if I want to get only the user with ID 2. Okay, here if you put slash users, you'll get all the users. But I want only the user with ID 2 or ID 1. So where will I pass this ID? I'll pass it in the path parameter. So for that, let's start creating another route. So how do you do that? So get user by ID. So how do you do that? App.get. Here first is, which is my REST API common endpoint slash API slash users, and then you need to pass the path parameter. So how do you do that? Slash colon ID. Sorry, colon ID. And then you do a callback function which takes request and response. Yeah, this is similar. You don't have to remember this. So for each and every route, you'll pass this function. So this is very common, request and response. Okay. So now how to access this ID? So where is this ID? I'm getting from the browser, right? That means from the client. So that means I need to access response. So const ID is equals to, I'll create user ID. You'll get confused by the same variable's name. And then request dot, where it is accessible, params dot ID. Okay. So through the request, through the params object, I'm accessing this ID here. And then I'm storing inside a variable. Okay, then what I will do, I will find it whether if it is there inside. Okay. How do you do that? Since actually whenever you're doing this right in the real time, there will be some something like called as an something called as OMRs. So through that you can access your object relational mapper, so ORM. So through ORM, what happens is you can access your databases. But since we are not connected to database, I'm writing pure JavaScript here. So, but this is not how you do in your actual live projects. In real world projects, you will be able to access databases. So for example, if you connect through this expresses through MongoDB, the process will be different. Since there is no database here, I'm just using plain JavaScript to mimic how you can do CRUD operations. Okay. So now here what I will do, I'll create another variable const user by ID data is equals to what I'll do users dot find. There is a method called as find. So here it will take a pass a callback function, and then we need to pass user dot ID is equals to my user ID. Okay. The thing is, you can see here your user ID is a number, but whatever you pass in the path parameter will be a string. So you need to convert this to a number. So how do you convert that? Number. Okay. You need to wrap it around number function. That means this path parameter gets converted to number because my ID is number. Okay. Once this is done, using the inbuilt method called as find, I will find my user ID should match with my route ID. Once this is done, I will send the response. Response.json user by ID data. So now let us see whether this will work or not. I will rerun this. So now if I do users, I'll get all the users. Say for example, I want only the user 2. So how do I do that? You need to go here /2. It is saying it's not working. Let's see what's the problem. Let us console log and see what I'm actually getting here. Just console log this user by ID data. Okay. So now I'll stop. I'll rerun this again. I'll go here, refresh this. Okay. Sorry, you can see there's a problem here. By mistake, I use dot. This is not dot. What it should be slash, right? Slash. Yeah, now I'll stop and I'll rerun this again. So now I should successfully get this. You can see I'm getting user 2. So if I remove and I'll pass 1, right? You can see I'll get user 1 is John. If I remove this, I'll pass path parameter 2 and then hit enter. I'll get Sneha. Sneha is what? User 2. Okay. This is how you can achieve user by ID using path parameter. So now say for example, if I want to create a new user. Okay. What I'll do, I'll just remove this user. I'll just keep one user called as John. I'm getting only one user. Say for example, I want to add a user. I cannot do that. The reason why I cannot do that, because in browser, if you want to send an any form of data, right? What you have to do, you need to have some kind of UI or application. So for that, there is something called as Postman. So I want you guys to install this. Go to Google, type Postman. This is usually, you can see in the title itself, it is used for API. It is an API platform, which is used for API development. You can see here. So whenever you're testing your APIs, you're building your APIs, the most common thing is your Postman. Okay, I'll say how to use this Postman. So first, once you go here, you need to sign up and then you need to start downloading this. Okay, take your time. So this is still loading here. Through this Postman, you can test your APIs. Okay. By the time, let's start creating our, now we understood how do you get by ID. Then what we'll do is, it's taking a lot of time. So in the VS Code, right? Say for example, in my laptop, this Postman is taking a lot of time to load. So since we have very less time, I'll use some other application to test our APIs. So for that, there is something called as Thunder Client. Okay. For that, to access that, first you need to go to your extensions, and then you need to search for API, and then you'll get something called as Thunder. Here also you have Postman, you can use this. But for now, since I have already installed Thunder client, I'll use Thunder client itself. Once I click here, let this load. Yeah, this is how it looks like. Okay. My Postman is still loading. I don't know what happened. I think there's some problem with this. So yeah, so now, as of now, we'll see how to do this API testing. Okay. So now go to your VS Code extensions. You need to install Thunder client. Okay. And then go to your Thunder client. So this is how it will look like. So now what I will do, inside my browser, what I'm doing every time I'm going here, I'm refreshing, I'm doing this. The problem is you cannot send any data from the browser because we don't have any front end, right? So whenever you're doing APIs, you need to test it. So how do you test that? Using some testing tool. So here what I'll do, I'll just use something called as Thunder client. So here once you click on this, it will ask what is your URL. So which is my URL? I'll go to my browser. I'll copy this. And then I'll go to my Thunder client. I'll paste it here. Okay. And then you need to select which HTTP methods you want. Here you have different methods. I just want get. Okay. Once I click on send, you can see here, I'm getting the data. Okay. Through this data, I have something called as status codes. So what are status codes? We'll just go get a quick revision. So whenever a server sends something, right? Whenever a server sends something, so here it will send the data as well as something called as status codes. So what are status codes? So status codes are nothing but a 3-digit numbers, which will be sent in the response, through the response. Why do we need status codes? The reason is every status codes have different meaning to it. You can see here, if the server wants to say everything is fine, the data which I'm sending has been successful, it will send a status code called as 200. That means it is okay. That means request was successful. For example, say you created something. For that, the status code will be sent was 201. That means created. Resource was successfully created. If, for example, say the request was successful, but there was no data to send, then you use 204. Okay, that is for no content. Similar way, you have status codes for redirection. This is rarely used. The most commonly used is 200, 201, 204, and then 400, 401, 403, and 404. You can see here 404. I guess you guys would have been familiar with this. 404 means not found. And then you have different unauthorized. Say, for example, some student will access some restricted this thing. So there you'll put something called as 404, means forbidden, unauthorized, bad request. And then you have different status codes. So this is very huge. You can go through this PPT. Basically, the server will send the response with the status code. Here you can see, I don't know what's wrong with the Postman here. We'll go through this Thunder client. Here you can see the status code is 200. That means it's okay. And then also it will send what is my size and the amount of time it took. Okay. So now what I will do, I need to create a post method. So how do I do that? So before that, inside Express.js, there is something called as middlewares. Okay. So what is the middleware? So say, for example, you need to understand this before you use a post method. Okay. That's the reason why I'm going through this topic. So say, for example, whenever there is a request and response, so before the request has been sent to the route, you can access it through the middleware. So through the middleware, what happens is you can modify the request and response objects. So which objects you can see here? This objects. Before this object has been sent through your route, you can modify this inside the middleware. Okay, you understood? Middleware is nothing but a function which takes request response parameters. And then there is also a parameter called as a next. We'll go through what is that. Through this, what it does is it can modify the request and response. So you have different kinds of middleware. So the built-in is express.json. So now we will go through this middleware. Then you have third-party middlewares you'll use for cores. Say, for example, you're connecting your front end with backend, you'll use this cores, cross-origin resource transfer. So custom middlewares, we'll go through that. So now you need to use a middleware called as express.json. The reason why you need to use a middleware, because whenever you have a request and response cycle happening, before the data gets sent to the particular routes, you can access and modify that. So now here, whenever you're trying to send some data through your testing or through your web application, right? You need to use a middleware called as express.json. So how do you do that? The syntax on how to use a middleware is app.use. You need to specify which middleware. Express.json. Once you use this middleware, you can successfully send the data from the front end in the JSON format. So without this, if you send the data in the JSON format, your Express.js will not understand. So once you use this middleware, what happens? It will modify the request and response objects. So now we'll create another method here. App.post. What is my common endpoint slash users? And then I need to pass a request and response. Then what I need to do? I need to extract this user's data, right? So how to extract that? It will be inside response. So const user data is equals to response dot params is used to access your path parameter. If you want to access the data, right, it is inside your body. Okay. Once this is done, what I need to do? Users dot push user data. Okay, push means it will add this data inside my array here. Okay, so now we'll try to rerun and test this. So now I have restarted. So now what I'll do is I'll go to my, after this, you need to send a message, right? That means whether the user has been successfully added or not. So how do you do that? Response.json. Here you'll send a message. User created success. Okay. So now I'll run this again. So now I'll go through my Thunder client here. What I'll do, I'll create a post method. The endpoint will be the same. Now, if you want to send some data, right, through your API testing, you need to go to body. Inside body, you need to select JSON. Okay. Inside JSON, I will send my data here. So what is my first property? ID, right? ID is, there is a single user here. Here you can see in the database. Sorry, in my web app, there is only one user. I need to create a second user. So how do you do that? Go here, user2 slash enter. And then what is the second parameter, second property? Username, right? Username. And then double quotes, Sam. And then what is the third property? Email. So what I'll do, I'll go to my under client itself. I'll put email column. I'll pass sam@gmail.com. Okay, then the last property is job. Okay, so now what I'll do here, I'll come here, input job is a manager. So now you understood this, right? First, you need to click on post method because whatever code I created, it is a post method here. You can see this is a post method. Okay. So now once I hit on send, let us see what will happen. I'm getting a message here. You can see the status code was 200. That means it was successful. And then this was the size. This was, now I'm getting this message, right? That means user created successful. So now how do I view the users? You need to change your HTTP method to get. Click send. You can see now. Just a minute. Let us console log and see what's really happening here. So like you need to create a new object and then you need to, yeah, the thing is you need to create a new object and then you need to pass the parameters individually. Since we don't have a real backend, we have to do this circus here. Okay. So now how do you access that? Dot ID. I'll remove this everything. I'll replace with user data. And then I'll paste this properties. If you have the backend connected, you don't have to do all this. Since we don't have the backend, we're just trying to mimic this. Okay. Now I'll rerun. I'll go to my Thunder client. I'll change it to post. Now I'll send this. Like that. Send. Let me console log and see here. LOG. Let us see what actually we're getting from the users. Now what I'll do, I'll stop this. I'll rerun this again. I'll go to my request. First I'll send. So now I'll see in get, I'm getting everything. Okay. So now I'll see inside my post. I do send. Let us see what I'm really getting here. You can see here, I'm getting the data here. Okay. So now you can see I'm successfully getting Sam as well. So now say for example, if I'll add some other person, for example, I'll go to my post here. I'll create another one, another user. So how do you do that? Go to your JSON. Inside the JSON, I'll add third one. Okay. Okay. So now here what I'm doing is I'm creating a third user and I'm setting a username and then an email and then a job. See. So now what I'll do, I'll send a post method through the same endpoint. So now if I click on send, you can see what happens. Third user has been successfully added. Okay, you can see in the terminal here. Okay, this is how you create post. What is the syntax? First, you need to create which HTTP method. Here, the endpoint should be same because this is the concept on your REST API architecture. Okay, you can see the endpoint is same. For this, you can add any path parameters you want, but this should not change. Okay, for this, you'll send different HTTP methods. Okay, do you have get, post? So now for you have something called as update also. As of now, we'll just see how to delete and then we'll go through middleware. I'll give you guys an assignment. So I want you guys to create a put method. So what is put? Put is used to update. So what I want to do is I want you guys to update the user. So whichever project you're creating, so I want you guys to write this method, which is similar to this. I'll say how to use. Here, you'll replace the post with put. And then here you need to fetch an ID. First, you need to check, convert that number. You need to check whether that user is there. If it is there, you need to take that user data. And then through this process, you need to replace it with the new data. And then you need to add it inside your list. Okay, this is up to you guys. Okay, now we'll go through what is delete. Okay, delete user. So how do you create this? So now similar way, app.delete. Here what you'll do, you'll pass a same endpoint. Here you need to pass a path parameter. The reason because if you just click delete, all the users get deleted. But you just want to delete only the user by ID. Okay, what I'll do, I'll just copy and paste this inside my, so that I'll be able to access all the three data here. Okay, so now what I'll do here, I'll come to delete. So here I'll take a request and response. Okay, once this is done, what I need to do, First, I need to fetch the user by ID. Okay. How do you do that? How do you access the ID? Request dot params dot ID. Okay. Once this is done, what I will do? Users is equals to users dot filter user user dot ID is not equals to ID, and then response dot JSON message user. So now I'll rerun this. So now what I'll do? I'll go to my here. I'll go to my delete. So here there is a user with what and all users I have. First, I'll check this. So now here you can see here you can see I have 3 users here, right? Just a minute, I'll maximize this. So here you can see I have user 3, user 2, and user 1. So now say for example, if I want to delete the user 1, so how do I do that? Go to your this, click on delete, and then you need to pass the what? Path parameter. So which is the user ID. Now what I'll do here, I'll just pass slash. So before that, I'll just console log the users here so that I'll see which users I'm left with after I have deleted. Okay. I'll just log users after delete comma users. Okay. So now I'll rerun this again. Now I have successfully rerun. So now what I'll do, I'll go to my testing API. So here what I'll do, delete, and then at last I'll pass a path parameter. So which user I want to delete? User 1. Okay, there are three users here. But now I just want to delete one. So how to do that? Through this endpoint, pass a path parameter, and then you need to select your delete HTTP method. If I click on send, you can see here, user deleted successfully. And then I got a message here. You can see it's not deleting. Just a minute. Let me check the logic here. I will log this ID also. Let us check whether I'm getting this ID also. Log ID, comma, ID. So now I'll rerun this and I'll check this again. What I'll go to here, delete, focus to API slash users. So check whether your path is same, API slash users. Yeah. So now here, click on send. I'll check whether my ID is same. Yeah, I'm getting ID users after delete. There is some problem with my filter method. So you can see what is the problem here. Can anyone say what's the problem? Here my ID, what is the data type of my ID here? It is a number. But what am I getting here? A string. What do I need to do? I need to convert this to number. Okay. So now I'll rerun this. Now I should successfully get the data. So now what I'll go here, I'll send delete. So now you can see one is deleted. I have only two Sam. Oh yeah, there is a repetition, but it's fine. You can see one has been deleted. Okay. But in real world application, this is not how you write a delete operation because since we are not connected with the backend, I'm just trying to mock how you create CRUD operations in your REST API. Okay. If you connect the backend here, the logic will be different. You won't be having the same logic here. Okay, since we don't have the backend, we are just trying to mimic it. So similar way, I want you guys to create this put method. Okay, now we understood how to create different HTTP methods, get, post, and then put. I'll just create put. I want you guys to write the logic for this. So put slash API slash user slash ID, comma, sorry, request, comma, response. Okay, we should write the logic for how to update your user. Okay, so then you have went through what is delete also. Okay, how do you test this? Through your testing tool. So since my Postman was not working, I used something called as Thunder client inside my VS Code itself. If you want Postman, you can install Postman also. It's up to you. I have Postman also already installed. But this Thunder client, you can see here, I have Postman already installed. But this Thunder client is more faster than the Postman. So that's the reason why I'm using this tool to test your APIs. So how do you test? You need to pass the path here and then you need to select different HTTP methods. So based on this, you'll get a response. Then each response will be attached with the status codes. Okay. Now we'll see how to create a custom middleware. So we went through what is a middleware, right? This is the middleware. It can modify your request and response objects. Okay, the reason why we need this is, say for example, you're creating an application and then you have a username and password. So based on username and password, you need to check whether this user is already a registered user or not, right? So how do you do that? There is something called as JWT. This is comes under web token. So what happens whenever a user logs in, we create a token for him. So whenever he makes a request, what happens is through the middleware, you need to check whether that request is secure or not. That means it has a token or not. So how do you check that? For every request, you will attach a token and then you will send the token through your request. So what does the middleware do? Middleware, before the request goes to your function, it will stop it. It's like a traffic police. So what it will do before it goes after the signal, it will stop at the signal. It will check whether this request is successful or else whether this request is secure. If it is not secure, it will directly send the response back. It won't even come to the backend. If it is secure, it will send the data to the request to the backend. Similar way with the response also. With the response also, you can modify through the middlewares. So now we'll just see a simple middleware. Like how do for example, what happens is, we went through the PPT, right? Here you can see there are different kinds of middlewares. So in built-in itself, you have something called as an URL encoder. This is actually used for your form data. If you want to do something with your JSON, you'll use express.json. And also you have third party. So now we'll get through what is custom middleware. So for that, what you need to do is come here, just create a new folder called as middlewares. And then what I'll do is here, I'll create a new file. Sorry, I'll remove this. Instead of folder, I'll just create a simple file itself. Why to make it complex, right? .js. Okay. So now here I'll create a function. Const. What this function does is, this function will attach a message to your request object. So no matter whether the request has been sent or not, that request so that request will be having whatever message I'm putting here. So okay. So now let us see how it is actually done. For example, say you want to create an called as is admin or not. So what I need to do is, so inside middleware, I will attach a string called as is admin if the user is successfully registered. Okay, there is a lot of huge concept to this. So I'm just simply showing a part of it. Okay, what I'll do is admin middleware. Okay, this middleware Since this is a custom middleware, it will be able to access three parameters. So one is request, response, and next method. I'll go through what is next also. So here what I'll do is I need to first write a logic to check if user is secured. So since there is no database here, I'm just showing how the middleware actually works in your real world application. So what I'll do, so for example, say for example, I return some logic and then I got to know that user is successful, is secured, and then he is an admin. So what I'll do, request dot role is equals to admin. Okay. Okay. So now once this is done, I'll just call this next method. So what basically I'm doing is this middleware is usually used for your authentication. Okay, so since we don't have backend, I'm just trying to mimic it, how it looks like. So first you'll create a function. It will take three parameters, request, response, and next. Okay, then you'll write a logic to check whether the user is secure or not. Okay, once this is done, what you need to do is you will attach some data to your request. You can see we're actually modifying our request. Okay, we're actually modifying our request. That means we're adding some data. Once this middleware is done, you need to call the next method. So what is this next method do? It will continue your program. It won't block the program. So once you have handled the request, it should be let go, right? So that the other application can access it. So for that, if you call the next method, this whatever action has been held, it will go to the next method. That means it won't stop the execution. Okay, now I'll use this middleware. So how do I use that? Go to your index below your JSON, app dot use. Here, first you need to export this. So how do you export that? Module dot exports is equals to, I'll put it inside an object. So I'll make it as this admin middleware. Okay. I have exported this. So now I need to import this inside my index. How do you do that? Const, sorry, is equals to require dot slash middleware dot js. Inside this, what I need to access is admin middleware. So now I need to use this. How to use that? Just pass it. That's it. We have successfully created a custom middleware. So now I will check whether my all the request has this data. So how do I check that? What I'll do is I'll just console log this. For example, say here you can see I'll console log this request. Okay. So now what I'll do is I'll just rerun this application. So now if I send some request here, you'll see what's actually happening. Okay. Now you can see that this is how much your request data contains. It's very huge, right? We don't want to access everything. So what I'll do, I'll just try to access whatever I have set in my middleware, which is the property role. Okay, what I'll do here, I'll go here, I'll access request.role. Okay, so now I'll try to rerun this. You can see there is so much of data which is consists inside your request. I'll rerun this and then I'll send the request, get request again. So now you can see I'm able to access the data which are set through middleware. Okay. Did you understand this? This is how you create middlewares. Okay. Say for example, if I want to create another middleware where you'll set some password, you can set some different roles. So here you usually write, for example, if you have the backend, right? Through the database, you'll send us something called as JWT token. So if the token is valid, you'll set the role here. If he's an admin means he can access some parts of website. If he's a user, he can access some parts of website. So through this, you can successfully use your middlewares for authentication and authorization. Similar way, you can create your own different middlewares for different purposes. Say for example, I don't want the users. So I want to, whenever I get a request, I need to get to know the date and time of the request. So how do I do that? So what I will do, I'll create another middleware. I'll just copy paste this. Here, instead of this, current, date, time. Okay. Then instead of here, is equals to, how do you do current date and time? New date dot to local string. Okay. This is how you create your current date. And then I'm setting it to my request object. So now what happens? I'll rerun this. So what I need to export this, right? Comma, paste. Once you export, you need to import this. So where do you import? Inside your app server, comma, current date time. So how do you use this middleware? Copy below this app.use and then paste your middleware. Once this is done, now I can access this data inside my request object. That means I'm modifying my request object. How do you modify? You need to modify inside your middlewares. Okay, middlewares means, don't get confused by this. It acts as a middleman. Okay. So now let us see whether I'm able to get this current date and time as well as this property. I'll change this to user. Okay. So now I'll rerun this. I'll send, I don't think I'm printing it. So let me just console log this also. This dot current date time data. So now what I'll do, I'll just sorry, I need to export this. I'm actually exporting a variable. I need to export the function, right? Yeah. So now I can successfully run this. So now I'll stop this. I'll rerun this again. So now if I send a get request, right, you can see what will happen here. You can see I'm getting the user. So where is the user? Inside my sysadmin middleware. I'm setting inside the request.role. You can see here request.role. And then you have request.current date time data. You can see here what is my date? 11 to what is my time? You can see here 8:58, 8:59 p.m. Okay, this is how you handle custom middlewares. So usually middlewares are used for authentication, authorization, and then permissions, and then you can modify your request and response objects. It's up to you. As of now, we just saw how it actually works in your real life applications. Okay. So now this is how you use your middlewares, and then this is how you create your HTTP methods. So now we have created a successful server, and then this server can handle your GET requests. Okay, get, post, put, delete, patch. So patch and put are nothing but which comes under your update itself. Okay, put means it will completely update your full data. Patch means you'll just update a small part of your data. That's it. Okay. So now this is how you can achieve your, this is how you create your application inside your server inside your Node.js. So now we have successfully created a server, and then we are able to handle all the methods using REST API architecture. Okay. So now, as of now, your Node.js model is completed. So tomorrow we'll start with MongoDB. So yeah, so this is the Node.js. You understood this, right? If you have any doubts, you can ask in the comment section. So I want you guys to create different HTTP methods, and then create different URLs, and then send like try to send different data and all. Okay, but whatever you send should be in the JSON format if you want to create an APIs. Okay. Other than that, if you have any doubts, you can ask in the comment section. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable class. So thank you all. Thank you for joining. We'll wind up for the day. Good night.